the needs that small businesses need in terms of, from the federal standpoint. They need tax relief. We need to create incentives for businesses to be creative. They need regulatory reform. I mentioned Obamacare before, but it's not the only one. There's several regulations that are choking the life out of our small business. I will, of course, work on those. But we have to be realistic, right? Whoever goes into Congress, next and succeeds Congressman Gibson is going to be a freshman congressman. Is going to be one of 435 representatives. So what is that person actually going to do here in the 19th district? And I've given this a lot of thought. And the bottom line is that this district needs a salesman. This district needs someone to go out and drum up business. We have incredible assets here in the 19th district. We have some of the most beautiful land in the world. We have universities and colleges where we have tens of thousands of students matriculating every year. Why aren't we partnering with those universities to provide an installed workforce for this area? We need someone to go out and talk to people around the country about bringing their businesses here. The strength of this district, the industries that have historically been the strength of this district have been agriculture, hospitality, light manufacturing, and technology. I will go out to companies in all of those areas. I will ask them to come to the district. I will ask them to invest. I will ask them to hire. And so, that's something that's tangible, that you can do, that you can go around. I've got to tell you something. That congressional business card is going to get you into boardrooms around this country. It's a powerful thing. And that's my background. A lot of congressmen, I think, would think that kind of activity would be beneath them. That's not what they want to do. They want to go down to Washington. They want to get on the A committee. They want to hobnob with the lobbyists. Not me. I want to go out and I want to bring business into this district. And on day one, that's what I'm going to do.
Mr. Faso, would you like a minute to follow up?
Well, I think it's all well and good to be a salesman for the district, and I certainly agree with that. But the fact is, the underlying business conditions in New York State are terrible. We rank 50th out of 50 states in terms of business climate. So unless we are able to fix the tax, the regulatory, and the adverse climate towards development, a lot of businesses from out of state are going to look at this and say they don't want to go there. Look at the Cuomo program, Startup New York. It's a big fraud. And basically what it says is we have to bribe you with 10 years of tax-free situation for you and your employees in order for you to come in. So what does that say to all the businesses that are there paying taxes and fulfilling their obligations all those years? They don't get anything, but the favored one that gives a campaign donation to Andrew Cuomo, they get a Startup New York zone. This is what's so wrong about economic development in New York State. You have to fix the underlying business conditions which make it impossible for people to develop here.
Mr. Heaney, 1 minute.
Yeah, so I totally agree. We need to fix the underlying tax issues, and I think one of the ripest opportunities is the corporate tax rate. I think there's a lot of bipartisan support for changing that, but that's going to take time, and we need help now. We don't have time to wait for a congressman, to move things along in Washington. We need someone who's going to get to work right away. And the other thing that we need is we need a congressman who's going to be business responsive, a congressman who understands what those businesses need, who is available to those businesses. And one of the other things I would like to do that I didn't get the chance to mention before is I'd like to create a liaison between my office and the business community in every county. So if you're having a problem with signage, you're having a problem with licensing, you're having a problem getting signs, you can reach out to your congressman and you can ask for help. And your congressman is an important person in the community and can work with the community and try to move things along and be a friend to the business community. And as a small business owner, I know how to do that. I really do.
Okay. On to another topic. I guess we kind of touched on that a little bit. And that's the issue of energy. Do you support fracking, or should we ban natural gas production? This isn't exactly the same thing, but and that goes to Mr. Heaney first.
So I definitely do not think we should ban natural gas exploration. Natural gas exploration, for anyone who wants renewables, natural gas exploration and natural gas is absolutely necessary to sustain renewables. You cannot have renewables without the ability to create power to make those renewables fit onto the grid, get the electrons onto the grid at the right time and the right place, okay? And natural gas, without question, is from an environmental standpoint vastly superior to coal. The issue of fracking, as a potential federal representative, I believe in local control of fracking. And I do not have any interest in telling the states what they ought to do about fracking. New York State has a ban on fracking. Texas doesn't. I would not interfere with either one. Now, I will say that in New York State, I do think that statewide ban is wrong-headed. I think that there are some areas where people should be able to frack, and if the people want fracking and the community agrees, maybe the county agrees, let them frack. Let it be local. Let it be decided by the people. I live in Dutchess County. If the people in Dutchess County don't want fracking, they don't need fracking. So this is an issue where, I want renewables. I want to see renewables come online as quickly as possible. But there's a lot of room between here and there. One of the things that's very important for us to do is we need better battery technology in order to enable renewables. Renewables can become truly scalable if we have a revolution in batteries. That means that we don't need standby power, fossil fuel standby power. We can just go straight to batteries, and you're going to see solar and you're going to see wind become a truly scalable technology. I personally think that's where our research dollars should be going, and that's what we should be encouraging.
Okay, Mr. Faso.
Yes, as we all know, Governor Cuomo, through executive action and regulatory action in the Departments of Health and DEC, effectively banned natural gas hydrofracking back 2 years ago. But it's important to note that before that decision by Governor Cuomo, which I think was more a political decision than a scientific one, the New York State Court of Appeals ruled in a seminal case that localities do have the right to either zone in or zone out certain types of natural gas development. And so I think that the areas in the state, especially along the Pennsylvania border, where they have large supplies of natural gas, would be willing to and desirous of doing so. It is interesting that I know that many of the communities that have banned hydraulic fracturing are communities where it would never happen. So it's a political easy shot for a lot of folks that want to make a point. But it's also important to note that it's vitally important that here we're in Oneonta. Oneonta, this building is heated and cooled using natural gas. It's New York State. We're all concerned about CO2 emissions. New York State has reduced CO2 emissions by about 20% in the last 20 years, 25 years, because of the increased use of natural gas substituting for electric generation of coal. The New York City Department of Health, interestingly, a few years ago estimated that 800 fewer people die each year from respiratory diseases because they've replaced heavy heating oil and coal for electric generation and heavy heating oil for heating apartment buildings in New York City. So there are beneficial effects from reducing CO2 and reducing particulate matter, and that's because of natural gas. I would note that it's vitally important that we have an all-of-the-above energy strategy that emphasizes renewables, nuclear, and fossil fuels that can be safely harvested and regulated for our people.
All right, next question will be from the media panel. Jim Kevlin.
There's someone shooting up a block and a half from here, and in Cooperstown, and in Richfield Springs, and in Milton, and in Kinderhook, probably right now. And we've heard an awful lot of palaver about the heroin scourge in the last 2-3 years. And I'm sure you've heard a lot personally from people who've met on the campaign trail. Give us a fresh idea. We've heard the gamut, and yet things really have not improved to any great measure. What have you picked up that you can that you would pursue if elected to Congress?
And that goes to Mr. Faso first.
Jim, thank you for the question, and I'll tell you, as I go around the district and I talk about the heroin and prescription drug abuse problem, invariably someone in the audience tells me a personal story that they or a family member of theirs or a friend of theirs has experienced. a child overdosing, a child being addicted, a friend dying because of a heroin overdose. The sheriff in one of my counties told me about going to an apartment, administering Narcan, and 4 hours later going back to the same apartment, administering Narcan. I think it's very clear we need a concerted strategy. Actually, this is an area, when they talk about gridlock and discord in Washington, this is an area where I think the President and Congress are actually starting to work together on. The President has offered a plan, which I think is a fairly comprehensive one. The House has passed a number of bills, so has the Senate. So I'm hopeful in this regard that we can have, there's no partisan issue on this. There's no, heroin abuse doesn't distinguish by race or gender or ethnicity or where you come from. It's affecting everyone. So what new idea? I'm not sure that we really need a lot of new ideas, but I can tell you this, we need more treatment. We need more long-term coverage for treatment because you can't kick a heroin habit in a 30-day detox. It needs to be much longer. We need much more public education. And I think just like with the government sponsors education campaigns about the hazards of smoking, etc., I think we really need to alert the public as to what's going on, because I think a lot of the public either avert their eyes to it or they just simply don't know the risks that it entails. Prescription drug abuse leads 75% of the heroin users start with prescription drug abuse. We have to restrict the availability of prescription drugs. The CDC is putting out new guidelines. The medical profession is dealing with it. And I could talk a lot longer, but my friend David has put up his red sign.
Okay. Mr. Heaney.
Yeah, so literally just last night, I was coming home from an event in Ulster County, and I'm a volunteer firefighter, and as I was driving towards Millbrook, I got a notification that there was an overdose in town, a 22-year-old male, non-responsive. And I have seen that message come in to our fire department, I would say probably on average about every 2 weeks. And for those of you who've not been to Millbrook, I mean, it is just the most beautiful little idyllic American town you've ever seen. And most of the people who are overdosing and receiving emergency care are young people. That makes me think about my own kids. I've met a lot of moms and dads who have had kids who become addicted. So my first priority is I want to save them. I want to save their lives. If they are addicted, I want to make sure that all first responders have Narcan kits and are trained on Narcan kits, and we should have as many Narcan kits available as possible. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Narcan, but it's an absolute miracle. It brings people back to life who otherwise would be dead from an overdose. The second thing is I had a mom tell me that her daughter went through a series of relapses. They didn't have the medical coverage to be able to pay for a program to get her into. The advice that she got from other parents was set her up, get her arrested, get her put in jail, because jail has the best drug treatment programs. There's something wrong with that. If we're offering great drug treatment programs in jail, why aren't we offering drug treatment programs to our kids and trying to save our kids' lives? And finally, interdiction. We have a pretty good sense. Our law enforcement community has a pretty good sense of where these drugs are coming from, what highways, what roads, what routes are being used. They need greater resources. They need canine units. They need interdiction. We need to stop these drugs from coming into our communities. And the final thing I'm just going to offer is that addiction is a lack of connection. And economic activity is very connected to this. The economic growth of the area is connected to this problem.
Thank you. Okay.
That 90% of the poppies in the world come from one province in Afghanistan, where we've spent $13 billion over the last X number of years. Is this an issue? I haven't heard any discussion about it. Is this an issue that figures at all in your assessment of heroin? And at the federal level, where one of you fellows may be operating, should there be action taken of a military or at least diplomatic quality to address that very specific issue? It's right there for us to go after.
Follow up a minute each. Mr. Faso, you first.
I'm talking about Helmand Province, and there's no doubt that we need to continue to try with our relations with the Afghans and the Pakistanis to deal with the Taliban insurgency. But that in and of itself does not change the economic incentives that exist on the ground. That's a much longer answer, but I think we have to continue to work with them to address this. And those poppies wind their way into Mexican cartels. And we have to do a better job, and we have also dealing with fentanyl, which is often much more potent than heroin coming in from China. So we've got to deal with that as well. But one idea that I do think, when someone goes into an ER and they've OD'd, right now the policy is they're released. And I think we have to reconsider this from a civil liberties standpoint. I don't think it's in their interest or in the society's interest to simply allow someone that's OD'd to walk scot-free out of there. I think there needs to be some type of mandatory treatment regime that is put in place to require them, or else we're just going to keep repeating this.
My mic's not even on, so, okay. His follow-up question was specifically about Afghanistan, the source.
Yeah, so your question basically is kind of this, it's a question that has applied to other drugs, which is really this issue of supply problem and the demand problem. And I think what we were just talking about is the demand problem. You're talking about the supply problem. And there's no question that, as a nation, we should do everything we can to cut off supply. And I would add to, in addition to focusing on the source in Afghanistan for the poppies, also the area of production, predominantly in Mexico, and dealing with the southern border of Mexico, which is porous, as we know, to immigration. It is also porous to drugs. This is another very important reason why immigration and the southern border has become a national security issue. But I want to argue to you that you've got to attack both. You've got to attack the demand side as well. And I really do believe that there's a connection between the economic situation in the 19th district. The 19th district is uniquely affected by this, I think, because of the economic devastation.
Okay, time on that. All right, we're going to move on to another topic. How should elections be funded? Should individuals and corporations spend unlimited amounts? And that goes first to Mr. Heaney.
Well, I have a pretty unique perspective on this at the moment. My opponent was recently supported by a PAC, a super PAC called New York Wins. And New York Wins received a donation of $600,000 from a single donor. And every single penny of that was essentially dropped on my head in the form of attack ads on television. And it's definitely had, its impact, for sure. And I think that there is something really, really wrong about the fact that a single person can waltz in, write a check for $600,000 into a congressional campaign and have an impact on that campaign. My question, thank you. My question is, we definitely need reform. It's impossible to disconnect that donation from the candidate. One has to wonder what that relationship is, what that relationship will be. But when $600,000 are involved, it strikes me that that candidate has been purchased. And it is impossible to separate the donor from the donee. So we have work to do. I believe in transparency. I do not agree with the Citizens United decision that corporations are people. I think we need sensible campaign finance reform, transparency, and that's the best way for us to reform our system.
Mr. Faso.
Methinks my friend protests too much. After all, he funded a super PAC directly with money from his own corporations and that of family members' corporations, but just before he announced his candidacy. And then he said, oh, I have nothing to do with it. But yet that super PAC, immediately upon creation, started attacking me. And so what's good for the goose, I guess, is good for the gander here. The fact of the matter is, every single reform that has been adopted in our country on campaign finance since 1974, the post-Watergate reforms, has resulted in more money being spent in the political process. And these reforms have not been successful at sanitizing the process. I do think we should have an immediate transparency on campaign contributions, and I think everyone should know who's giving a donation and what individual, wealthy individual, is writing a check to his own campaign. We won't find that out until sometime in a few weeks when the filings take place. So my friend really does object too much because he is unfortunately the one that started this process. Now, people independently, not connected to me, started this effort and they decided to participate in this campaign. But the thing called the phony New York Jobs Council, which Mr. Heaney's family created, imagine that, New York Jobs Council. They created it in Washington, D.C., and then they created a phony post office box in Hudson, New York, as if it had something to do with Hudson or this district. I mean, this is really rich coming from Mr. Heaney, but then again, it is rich.
Okay, that's enough on that topic. We've had questions on a variety of topics. We've talked about tax policies, spending and growth, candidate Trump, veterans care, natural gas and energy, heroin, and campaign finance. I'm going to give you one more question based on the audience's submissions. And this is an issue, actually, that I know is near and dear to members of the league as well. What is your opinion regarding new voter ID requirements and registration, voter registration procedures and opportunities? Mr. Faso.
Well, voter ID laws are not something that's a factor here in New York State. I presume your question relates to what's going on in other states. I do. Pardon me?
Right.
No, voter registration is done at the state level. So, but we could. I do think that I can tell you, as someone that's a candidate for office in New York State. New York State has a pretty Byzantine voter registration process, and oftentimes people are on the voter rolls for many years after they're gone. And I have one person in the town of Kinderhook, an enrolled Republican, and I remember going to that house to get this fellow's mother's signature a few years ago, because I'm a local Republican committeeman in my town. And I said, well, where's your son? She said, oh, he's for 12 years now in Boston, but he's still on the voter rolls. And we simply don't have a very good process for cleaning the voter rolls. I think we should, frankly, make it easier for people to get absentee ballots. I think we should make it easier for people to register. I do not favor early voting, and let me tell you why. Because all of the studies that have been done on early voting say it doesn't enhance overall voter participation. And I think we lose the communitarian aspect of everyone going to vote on November 8th this year with the same information or misinformation as the case may be. But at least if an event happens 2 weeks before the election, but a voter has voted 3 weeks before the election, their vote is no longer effective if that factor influences them. So I do think make it easier for people to register, make it easier for people to vote absentee, and clean up the voter rolls would be a really good thing here in New York State.
Okay, Mr. Heaney.
Yeah, I have to say, as a first-time candidate, I've been surprised to find that New York's election system is very antiquated, very old-fashioned, and definitely needs to be updated. One of the things I think that's just so important is we just have to make sure that people are not disenfranchised, but we also have to make sure we have legitimate elections. I agree with John that we need to make life easier for people who want to vote. and encourage people who want to vote. And I think that includes absentees. I actually disagree on early voting. I think that we should allow people to vote in whatever fashion or they wish to. But at the same time, I also believe that identification of the individual, better identification of the individuals is required. Right now, the only way to identify whether or not someone is who they say they are is a signature. There's in addition to the people sitting on the voter rolls that are deceased, there's a lot of opportunity for fraud. So I think the challenge that we face is making sure that we encourage voting, we not disenfranchise anybody, but at the same time we make sure that we have valid elections.
Thank you. And that's going to conclude our question and answer session. So our closing statements are going to be in reverse order from the opening statements. So each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to summarize, and Mr. Faso will go first.
Barbara, thank you very much. And again, thank all of you for coming. I mean, this is great. This is great. Terrific civic involvement. And I know all of you came from the Republican debate. You're not interested in that Democratic debate afterwards. So I truly appreciate your participation here tonight. Again, I'm John Faso. I've lived and worked, raised our family for 33 years in this district. My wife, Mary Frances, and I, who I mentioned is our school nurse at Ichabod Crane High School for the last 20 years, we're deeply imbued in this community. I've served in public service previously, and I am very, very anxious and angry about what's going on in our country today. I think we need to change direction in our country, and I think we need to send people to Washington who have an idea, concrete ideas on how they want to fix the problems that we face. The major problem is lack of jobs and opportunity. That's why people are fleeing, beating a path out of this state. I mentioned earlier, 1 million people in the last 10 years have left upstate New York. Why is that? It's because taxes are too high, it's too hard to do business. We're the 50th worst state in the country to do business in, and we are simply driving people away. And we're in a situation right now where we've got to have dramatic changes. That's why I've offered this proposal on fixing Nelson Rockefeller's 50-year mistake. Your county property taxpayers here in Otsego County or in Delaware County shouldn't be paying for Medicaid out of the property tax, when every other state figures out how to do it out of state revenue. That's how it was intended. We should fix Nelson Rockefeller's 50-year mistake. We need to address the heroin and opioid addiction crisis that's affecting us. We need to preserve our national security, and we need to defend the Constitution and the Second Amendment. And I'm a very strong supporter of the Second Amendment and individual and religious liberties under our Constitution. So we have it in our power under our Constitution to fix what ails America. And let's go ahead on November 8th and do it.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Heaney, closing statement.
Barbara, thank you. Thank you also to the audience for being here and participating, and thank you to the league for putting this event together. This has been a great opportunity. I also want to thank John for participating as well. I'd like to end where I began, which is to talk about this issue that I discovered myself was the biggest issue that I found in talking to voters, which is this issue of the loss of faith in this country. When I first started this process, I really thought that we were going to be talking about, the big issues were education or the economy or energy. And as I went door to door, what I learned was that that was wrong, that the biggest issue is the fact that people don't believe in our system anymore. And I really do believe that the congressman's most important duty right now is restoring their faith in their system, and restoring their faith in their government. So my message to you is a message of reform. It's a message of term limits. I think term limits are necessary to rebuild people's faith in the government and in their representatives, that they're not going there to turn this into a career. I believe that congressmen, if they serve a single day in Congress, they should not be able to go on and become highly paid lobbyists. I think Congress should not have a better medical plan than our veterans, or than you or your family. And I don't think they should have a better pension plan than you or your family. And I also think someone needs to stand up and stop taking special interest money, which is choking the life out of our economy, it's choking the life out of our small businesses. So that's what I want to do. I want to work to restore people's faith in this system. I will be that reform. I will live that reform. I want to stand up for our veterans, our 52,000 veterans we have in this district, and I want to stand up for our small businesses, because I've been one. I've been in a small business for the last 20 years of my life. I know what they need, and I know that they represent the future of the economy here in this district and all around this country. I thank you again, and if you are a Republican, I humbly ask for your vote on June 28th. Thank you.
Thank you.